Good afternoon and welcome to Industry Insights. My name is Gethin Roberts from Iterate, a purpose-driven product design consultancy here in the UK. And today I'm thrilled to be joined with Philip Johnson, an independent design and innovation consultant based in London. Welcome, Philip.
Thank you very much, Gethin. Thanks for the opportunity as well to participate.
You're very welcome. You're very welcome. Thanks for joining. I know today that we were planning to do something a little bit different to our normal industry insights. And, you've spent a life and career so far in design and innovation. And I'm really keen to kind of reflect on many of the lessons that you've learned and to hopefully understand how we might be able to kind of better prepare ourselves in this industry to kind of navigating through such a disruptive time at the moment. But before we really get into that, it'd be good just to kind of hear from you, just a brief overview of your career to date, if that's okay.
I, I will keep it as brief as I can. Absolutely. So I can never really decide if I'm a design-informed marketing person or a marketing-informed design person.
Okay, interesting.
But I kind of first came across design in a serious way when I was involved in promoting innovations for people like Wilson Sporting Goods, 3M, and one or two others. And that was really what whetted my appetite for design. And was then very fortunate to go to the Design Council, where I had a
Okay.
role in running a program called Millennium Products, which
Okay.
was promoting UK innovation both at home and internationally. Then had spells at the Patent Office, highlighting the role that IP plays in innovation. I've also supported small business growth through publicly funded programs, and had a spell working at Denmark's Ministry of Foreign Affairs to help promote creative businesses from Denmark to internationalize their work.
hmm hmm hmm
I'm now working across a number of different projects and have a thirst for many more.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, it sounds a very varied career, but is there kind of one common theme that connects all of those particular experiences? The Intellectual Property Office, Design Council, the Danish Ministry of Foreign Affairs. It's quite a varied career.
Yeah, no, I mean, absolutely. But I suppose that the one thing, the thread that kind of runs through it is advocacy for good design, and I
Okay.
think I think that's something that perhaps I've fallen into because it's not something that is done sufficiently or often enough, and I think
Mm,
there's a very strong need always to actually shout about good design, and the fact that I think we only pay attention to design, as we were talking beforehand, when there are issues that are uh, demanding design's attention. So, such as this hot spell at the moment, how could design actually change the way that we build houses to address the variations in heat? And it's things like that that means that there's a constant appetite for it, but it needs to be driven all the time in terms of raising its profile. And I think
interesting.
that's what's kind of run through everything I've done.
Yeah. Okay. And so, have you found that advocacy has become easier over the years as people's understanding of design has developed, or is that remained fairly consistent? Has that sort of changed?
I would say it's peaks and troughs, and
Okay.
I think at the moment we're in a pretty significant trough.
Yeah.
And I think I mentioned the work at the Design Council, and that was the Blair government, and that was very much about promoting design and innovation as part of Britain's identity. Um,
hmm hmm
but I do think that a lot of the time um, that public support and endorsement for design is critical, particularly as it informs businesses about design's importance. And I think at the moment, and I think for quite some time, we've had people making decisions about where funding goes in terms of business support who don't have an appreciation of the value that design brings.
Uh-huh.
And I think there's far too much of the mentality that persists that, design is just making something look pretty, and
Hmm.
it's kind of superfluous. And
Hmm.
so I think there's a constant need to actually reinforce that in terms of, it's an integral part that every business should be paying attention to.
Interesting. And so, have you a trend that you may have seen? I mean, does this exist whereby, when possibly the UK is in a economically difficult position, that then design is something that does attract less funding during those periods, when actually design is, a really important tool for helping businesses and economies to grow. Have you noticed that's a trend at all?
No, I mean, I think that's absolutely right, and I think it's pretty reflective of the need when things are uh, not performing well economically.
Mm,
That's when the need is greatest to be
yeah.
looking at developing new ideas, but bringing new ideas into the business, looking at what your competitors are up to, looking at what other developments are happening in terms of technology, in terms of materials, in terms of user needs, and actually addressing those. And I think
Uh-huh.
we are not, again, not doing enough of it, because an awful lot of business leaders are so busy being business leaders and managing the day to day, they're not looking ahead to the future. Um, I did some business support work probably about 5 or 6 years ago, and we actually did a survey of
Okay.
business leaders of SMEs,
Hmm.
and it was, I think we actually talked to about 200 business leaders, and we asked them, where do you go to for new ideas?
Yes.
Um, and it was around 80% of them said, well, we don't look for new ideas, you know,
Wow.
and and that's kind of like a very, very sobering response, but quite a clear message that it's not high on business people's agenda, or at least those business people's agenda.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think there's probably a note, a difference that's worth noting, just in terms of what we consider design to be, or design thinking to be, in the sense that my background particularly is in product development
Yep.
and designing new products and taking those to market. And then there's the others that see design in a digital sense, maybe graphic design or application design. But I think that what you're talking about there is that kind of design thinking approach that can be applied to running a business, or establishing a business and systems, and the way that you present it, well, internally, but also to the market as well. So,
No, I think that's absolutely right, and I think the thing, that is something we do here that's quite different from many other places, is the way we kind of silo different types of design. And
right, okay.
I'm sure you know you'd concur that if you're a business and you're using design well, that should be in every single aspect of your business, and it
Hmm.
should be running through the DNA of the company,
Hmm.
and everybody who works there. And if
Hmm.
everybody is informed about it and buys into and understands, it's about the brand. I mean, it really is part of that, and so fundamental. Um, then I think that can really enhance the business's use of design,
Hmm. Hmm.
the understanding that people have design and how it fits, from customer interactions through to developing products, through to the brochures for those products and the websites that promote them, and absolutely, the signs on the side of the vans. It's everywhere. It always should be
Absolutely.
everywhere.
Absolutely. So would you say, based on maybe somewhere that you've worked previously, or maybe even not, is there any organizations that you feel are getting it right, that are, are good examples to hold up for, they're really leveraging the power of design in the best way possible? Can you think
I
of
mean,
any?
yeah, I mean, my limited interaction with 3M.
Okay.
Was an interesting example. So, I worked on a product called Breathe Right, which was a nasal strip that was
Okay.
designed
Wow.
to help stop people snoring. And it was
Okay.
a very, very clever device, but which I suppose a layman would describe as two bits of plastic in a plaster. Um, but the whole company was predicated on um, this idea of innovation, and it's a kind of a well-known anecdote about engineers at 3M being given, I think, 15% of their time to work on ideas and
See.
their own ideas away from the business. And it's that kind of mindset, I think, permeates the entire business. Well, it did when I was involved in that small way with it, and I think it creates its own energy, and builds sort of much more of it, and you get this kind of these synergies building, and yeah, I think it really was a very
Interesting.
energetic place to work.
Interesting. Yeah, that's because my reference point for 3M is probably the post-it note. Um,
Absolutely.
and and I do remember kind of reading a story that they developed an adhesive, but which was semi permanent, but they weren't quite sure how to apply it into the market, and so it was very much that they developed that product, and the post-it notes then was kind of created off the back of that, rather than creating the adhesive set as a second part of the
No, I
post-it
think
note.
you're right. I think there's something about bookmarks in hymn books as being, sort of how they started to find their use. And yeah, I mean, who would have thought a glue that didn't work could actually be turned into such a product?
Yeah, yeah, it was very good. It was a very good story. Okay, so over the last however many years, 30 years or so, you must have seen huge shifts. We've seen digital transformation, globalization, additive manufacturing, and now artificial intelligence. And so, is there have you felt along that journey that there's any of these shifts when they've occurred that they would genuinely change the landscape, in the moment?
I mean, again, it's so interesting to reflect with, how everybody's talking about AI at the moment. Um, Because I'm pretty sure that was how everybody talked about the internet, and everybody talked about e-commerce, and, um, I mean, I don't wish to, in any way date myself, but, when I started work, we didn't have computers on our desks. I think it was one computer and a fax machine in an office of about 200 people. Um, and, if we think about how integral computing is to all of our lives now, you know,
Hmm.
and perhaps it's been because it's been over a longer period of time that it's become embedded. Um, I think we're pretty good at actually adapting to the new technologies. Um, I think it was was Maynard Keynes who about 100 years ago said that we'd only be working about 15 hours a week because of technology. And I suspect you're kind of working a few more hours than that every week, Gavin,
Absolutely.
and,
Yeah, absolutely.
I think everybody is just, working. I mean, we don't commute anymore, but we spend that time working, and it's not as
Hmm.
if, we have these huge, opportunities for leisure that perhaps were predicted.
Hmm.
Maybe we should find a few more of those opportunities, but, so I think we're very good at adapting to the technology, and for it to become the new normal, and who knows what AI will bring next.
Interesting, because there is a lot of fear, possibly scaremongering around the introduction of AI, and you know, I'm hearing I'm hearing statistics about redundancy numbers at the moment and what that sort of looks like in the UK over the coming years. But just reflecting on that point, that there's kind of alignment with the introduction of computers and the internet. Do you think then that it's not so much the technology itself, but it's actually the speed that this technology has come about and that seems to be impacting our lives? by comparison to those other technologies that is maybe kind of causing that
I,
uneasiness rather than.
I think that's right. There is the speed. There is the fact that we are all sufficiently, or the vast majority of the population must be sufficiently equipped to be able to access AI on their desktops or their laptops at home. And so there's not a them and us element to it. It's kind of universally accessible. But I think what I think is quite interesting is how it combines with how in the UK in particular,
Mhm.
we've kind of rolled over and embraced the internet as far as a source of retail is concerned. And I think the issue about um, startup or early stage jobs, I think a lot of people used to go into retail and hospitality. A lot of that was based in town centres and high streets. And
Yes.
I think on the one hand, we've all been delighted to embrace, home delivery of goods that we order online and get the next day. And then also complain that the shops that we used to go to buy these things in aren't there anymore. Um, and I think what's quite interesting now is, and I think the business model will be the same with AI, is now that we're kind of dependent on that sort of a retail home delivery model.
Yeah. Hmm.
um, the prices don't seem to be as low as they used to be, and the delivery charges don't seem to be as competitive as they once were. And the fact that that as well, we kind of make a pact that allows that to happen, and we have vans scuttling up and down our streets all the time. Um, Probably very few of which are made or designed in the UK. Um, it's not. I don't think it's necessarily been the smartest way to embrace change.
Okay.
And
Okay.
sorry, just on the last point, I mean,
Yeah.
I do think I would love to think that someone somewhere in government is developing a plan for how to not only embrace AI, but also how to embed AI within the national curriculum and to start teaching kids to use AI in a positive way, but also to think about you know what is going to be the implication for jobs. And
Yes.
it's so important that you get on the front foot early, and I think we're not necessarily as on the front foot as we should be.
Yeah. I mean, so that is an interesting point, particularly around education, because it's one thing being able to use the tools and the technologies that are available to us, and there's the experience and training related to that. But how about the kind of the mindset, the human, the human element to it? Is there any is there any key skills that you think, have managed to remain consistent through all of these technology changes? And if not, then what human skills do you think we should really be focusing on developing as a result of AI being introduced?
Well, I mean, that's again, I think that's really interesting because it comes back to the point about what makes, I guess, human-based design different from AI-based design. And
Yes.
I do think there's an aspect um, about the way that we interact with materials, the way we interact with shapes and forms that can't be replicated yet, perhaps by machine. And add to that, the stories about the people that create the products, which I think there's something that we don't tell often enough, but we should really be telling more. So I think understanding form and shapes is really key. I do think that
Okay.
that sadly the way that design and technology has been um, perhaps downgraded in education is something that will um, cause issues in the long term.
Long
And
term.
I hope that as part of how we're addressing AI and the impacts of that, it may design and technology may have something of um, a renaissance, because it's really important to get children thinking about products that they use, the world that they're in, and how to collaborate together. And I think as a subject, design technology does that wonderfully well. We once
Hmm.
had a big advantage with where we were with that in the curriculum in the UK, and I think we don't anymore.
Hmm. And so, based on your your experience with the design council, and also I believe that you're currently working with the Design Business Association. Do those kind of organisations? Do you feel that they have a responsibility to assist with um, y- education and training for those people that are coming up through?
I mean, yeah, absolutely yes. I think the two are slightly different in that the Design Business Association is a members body, so it's kind of effectively
Okay.
a trade organization.
Okay.
But I hope that with its new chief executive Matt Hunter, the Design Council will perhaps look at how best to engage with education and the way that design and technology is taught. And I think the Design and Technology Association, which is an association for teachers of design and technology, is again doing a really good job in making connections with local businesses to highlight the importance of design education. But it needs senior government decision makers to endorse perhaps the profile that I think design education needs. And unless people actually understand why design is so integral, I'm not totally convinced that it will get the priority that or the prioritization that it should have.
See. I see. Okay. So I'm keen to just maybe add a bit of an international perspective, based on your experience in working with the foreign ministry. Do you think that different nationalities will have different perspectives on, these priorities that we're talking about?
Well, I mean, yes, as I mean, very briefly, possibly one of my most embarrassing moments was standing in front of a room full of Danish SMEs and telling them how important it was for them to use design in their business, and being taken aside quietly afterwards and being told that, yeah, kind of they know that. Um, but I mean, yes, there's different countries use design in different ways. In Denmark, it's interesting that I think they did a recent survey, and it's about 90% of business leaders actually acknowledge how important design is in terms of competitiveness, in terms of innovation, in terms of driving their business forward. So, whereas we might struggle to get that message through, it's something that is absolutely bread and butter in Denmark. And I think that also feeds through to society as well.
Okay.
People expect things to be well designed, and it's something that
Yeah.
creates a kind of a better life for a lot of people, more
Yes.
satisfaction, more efficient use of public resources as well.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I think some of the ways in which in Denmark they've embraced the green transition, and circularity, and a greater appreciation for sustainability,
Yeah.
both in materials and in energy. Something again we're kind of a little bit lagging behind. So I do think there are different perspectives that we could learn from.
Yeah. Okay. Um, it's fascinating. So I know that you've also worked with startup businesses, and I think some of those have been in the healthcare sector. So just kind of going back to the point about challenges, that we face right now. Do you see that startup businesses, is that a more challenging environment
Yeah.
than it was previously?
Well, I mean, I absolutely think it is. I think there are issues with procurement in the healthcare sector, particularly when it comes to the NHS. That that essentially means that every NHS trust has its own procurement policy, and will have its own approach when it comes to working with new businesses. I think a lot of startups are perhaps tending towards looking at working with apps rather than developing products,
Okay.
uh, because it's clearly a less of a financial commitment. In the startup that I've been working with, a company called Walk with Path, um, we've been looking at insoles and how they can
Okay.
help people with diabetes to alert them to ulceration on the foot. Um, and one of the challenges is finding the right way into healthcare providers. That looks at both the patient care aspect, but also the economics. And it's about finding the right balance.
Hmm.
But interestingly, the challenge with ulceration and amputation amongst diabetes sufferers, it costs up to about £1 billion a year to the health service,
Wow.
and the health service spends more on that than they do on, I think, on breast cancer, and other forms of cancer. But it's a kind of a very un low profile condition.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
and we're moving much more towards prevention rather than curing things, and I think that's a very much a positive. So, you know, one of the things the insole is aiming to do is to alert people to the problem before it becomes a problem. And
Okay.
I think that's a great position for a startup to be able to offer.
Okay. Okay. So we've got a question, and we're coming to the end of the session. It always goes so quickly, and the healthcare topic is a huge one. That's probably warrants a discussion in itself. But just a final question from me before we go to Gary. I think has got his hand up. What, Philip, gives you confidence about the future? What are you enthusiastic about? What are you hopeful about in the
Um,
coming years?
that's I think we do have this. We're very fortunate to have this innate curiosity about the way things work and how things work and how things can work better. Um, every year I go to new designers when
Okay. Yep.
the exhibition of graduates' work is on, and I think you can't but fail to be delighted by things that are put on show there, and every
Great.
now and then you come across fantastic new innovations that
Mm,
make you
mm.
sit up and think, how unbelievable is that? I was um, there's a company I heard about just a few weeks ago called Lightlock, who are based in Swansea, um,
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
and they've developed the technology to um, they work in bicycle locks, but
Hmm.
the material that they've developed for bicycle locks actually turns onto the angle grinder and starts destroying the disc on the
Wow.
angle grinder because it's
Okay.
so tough. And you know it's one of those light bulb moments that makes you think, oh, that's quite a nice idea. Destroy the tools of the people that are trying to destroy the bike lock.
It's very good.
So it's little things like that that you know continue to surprise and delight, and
That's good.
I'm
Yeah.
sure that will keep happening. But I do think,
New innovation.
yeah, we need to hear more stories about it when it happens.
Very good. Very good. Okay. So thank you, Philip. Let's go to Gary. I think you're on mute at the moment. If you'd like to
Not
ask a
anymore.
question for Philip. There we go.
It's not really a question. It's just to back up what Philip was saying about the NHS and how difficult it is for small startups to get into the NHS. So we are a small startup with a medical device. Gethin knows the story there. I won't bore the rest of you with that. But we had lofty ambitions of being able to diagnose urinary tract infections very, very quickly in GP surgeries within the NHS, and we've had zero uptake, not a single thing within the NHS. And what we've had to do, we've pivoted now, and we're looking at private GP surgeries, private urologists, And if there are any medical device companies out there that are trying to break into the NHS, I would have a look at yourselves and see if you can find those private GPs, those private practices that don't have that extended procurement pathway, not just a procurement pathway, but the need for a NICE recommendation to use either a device or a diagnostic. So that would be my advice if there are in the audience. Don't necessarily aim at the NHS. Look for those private practices where there's way less red tape.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, and we've certainly gone down that particular route as well, working with sort of private clinics and chiropodists and the like who are in that area. Absolutely.
Very good. Thank you, Gary. Okay, is there anybody else? Any other questions, Philip? No? Okay. All right. So yes, Philip, thanks very much for your time today. And yeah,
No,
it
thank you,
always feels like, half an hour is never enough. But you're on LinkedIn. Are you happy for people to reach out if they have any follow-up questions?
Yeah, very happy, very happy. I think
Yeah.
yeah, that's the beauty of it is the way it does connect everybody and enables those conversations to carry on. So more than happy.
Brilliant. Thank you. Okay, so the speaker for the next session of Industry Insights is yet to be confirmed. So we are, if anybody's interested, if anybody's involved in design, manufacturing, and innovation, and interested in appearing on Industry Insights next month, which will be, it's normally the last Wednesday or Thursday, it'll be of June. Then please do reach out and we can get you booked in and we can have a discussion similar to this. But yes, thanks again for a fascinating discussion. And I feel more reassured about the future than I did before we spoke.
Delighted.
Thanks, then. Cheers.
Thanks,
Thanks
Gethin.
all. Thanks for joining. Thanks. Cheers. Bye.
Bye.